All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody had a good lunch if you had a chance to grab one. So we're going to, again, appreciate your attendance here at Dairy Days. We're going to start with this afternoon's program, and Fred Hall, our dairy field specialist in Northwest Iowa, is going to be the first on the program. Fred's been with us for about 4 years. He did a stint for about 10 years in Texas working with Extension there, but actually before that, he was actually working in Iowa Extension. So he's been a long time colleague working here with Iowa Extension and specializing in a lot of milk marketing type things. And that's going to be part of his topic here today. So I think, Fred, we can take her away.
Thank you, Larry, for that introduction. Again, my name is Fred Hall, and I'm the Northwest Iowa Dairy Specialist for Iowa State University Extension. And this afternoon, I'm going to talk about my take on what the dairy outlook is going to be for the next few months. As we look at this, there's lots of aspects that come into play. We're going to talk about exports and demand, storage, production, and how the government payments affected our net farm incomes in 2020 and what they're going to look like coming up in 2021. For those of you who've heard me before, I generally start out talking about exports, and I really like this slide. It tells the whole story in one side. If you look there on the left, that first column, we'll look at the aggregate volume. That's how much did we sell. And you can see comparing 2019 to 2020, as of November, we are doing quite well. We've exported more volume than we did in 2019. Then look at the far right, and this is the dollar value. And this brings together the prices of all the commodities. It's affected by the value of the dollar, but you can see that again, 2020 was a pretty good year for dairy. Then when we look at the middle, that really combines all of the commodities. If you look at both ends, you can see that the powders do really well. We've really increased the sales of those. Total whey there on the right side. And logically, that's because of the Chinese purchases, because of their swine situation. Cheese, it's just a tick higher than it was in 2019. And then butterfat or butters, you can see that just not much there. And remember this point because as we go farther into the program, we'll see what that does in our export world. In fact, we are a net importer of butter. As always, we talked about exports. We know that about 15 or 16% of all production is exported. But if you think about it, that means that we've got about 85 or 84% that's consumed or stored in this country. And what I always want to do is kind of get a 30,000 foot view of what the consumer is doing right now. And one of the things I use is the Consumer Confidence Index. The board has been doing it for many, many years. You can see that the index improved moderately in January after decreasing in December. The index now stands at 89.3, up from 87.1 in December. However, the present situation index, based on consumers' assessment of the current business and labor, is markedly decreased. Consumers' appraisal of what's going to happen in the next few months, especially in the next 30 days, is also decreased. It gives us a lot of questions. What's going to happen with consumers? We've been following COVID worldwide. We know it's affecting the economics of all countries. So while things are trending up, we still could hit a stall. We know that half of the dairy products are consumed away from home, which means how we evaluate restaurants is pretty important. Restaurant Performance Index is one that I look at. This past December, we posted a healthy gain. It's a composite index that looks at a lot of things. In December, it was 9.6, up 1.5% from November. Growth is fueled by improvements in operators' outlooks, what they think their sales are going to do and what their staffing levels are going to be. And if you look at that bottom right chart, they look and see what do you think the conditions will be in 6 months? And you can see some steady improvements. 60% are saying it's going to be better in 6 months. About 18% say it'll be worse. And that figure is declining pretty steadily. So that's a pretty optimistic outlook for us on the restaurant side of things. Now we're going to shift gears just a little bit and look at storage. And you really can't talk storage without talking about production. I'm going to start with cheese, especially American and cheddar cheese. If you look at the red line, you can see it's been significantly up since September. From the beginning of 18 to the end of 2020, production of cheddar cheese grew by 6%. And you look at those lines, it's never really varied more than about 2%. So, it's been, while we've experienced some hectic things, it's had a pretty good trend line. Now, I use the term American and cheddar almost interchangeably, and we've got to understand that cheddar cheese is about 70% of all American cheese. So moving into what the stocks or what's in storage is, again, the red line is 2020. And you can see since October that we've had significant amount of cheese being put in storage. That's even recognizing that our consumption has increased about 5% over the last 3 years. The recent cold storage report, total cheese stocks at the end of the year amounted to about 1.4 billion pounds. Between November and December, total cheese inventories grew by over 50 million pounds. That's nearly 10 times the average increase over this period during the previous 5 years. As you know, cheese is priced by what's available. And as we look at what's in storage, we don't see a lot of bright spots in our cheese pricing. Now, the other commodity I really want to look at is butter. Again, as you look at the production side, you can see that red line is ahead of both 2018 and 2019. So we are producing more butter. Those churns have been working almost overtime because of the availability of cream. Toward the end of 2020, we had increasing spread of high domestic production and a static level of domestic disappearance. So that really adds to the issue of stocks in storage. USDA reported that that there was 273.8 million pounds of butter stocks at the end of December. And that was the strongest they'd been at that time of the year since 1992. it also has a uniqueness in that any of this product manufactured prior to December 1 can only be sold at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange until the end of February when it goes into the common stocks. And the likelihood that butter prices will probably struggle for the next few months. We're going to shift gears and look at production. Again, the red line is 2020, and you can see since August, we've really had significant increases in cow numbers, and that combines with the milk per cow. If you look at the lower right chart, you'll see that the milk per cow since October has been moving upward quite a bit. Production in the United States during that October-December quarter totaled 55.6 million pounds, up 3% from the year before. The average number of milk cows in the United States during that quarter was 3.43 million, 59,000 head more than the July-September quarter, and 81,000 ahead of the same period last year. Milk production in December alone increased 18.9 billion pounds, or about 3.1 more than the same month last year. Total production for the year will be increased at 1.9%, adjusting for the leap year. This dramatic herd expansion has really made the availability of milk amazingly strong. U.S. producers added an astonishing 9,300 cows to the herd, bringing December's cow numbers to the largest figure since 1995. Let's bring that to Iowa. Milk production in Iowa during December totaled 466 million pounds, up 4% from the previous December. That's according to the latest milk production report. Average number of milk cows during December was 220,000 head, 1,000 more than last month, and 5,000 more than last year. Monthly production average per cow was 2,120 pounds, and that was up 40 pounds from the December report. Now, as we look at this, we talked about Iowa and the nation, but this slide will help us understand exactly where the increases are coming from. We had strong growth across most of the Midwest, Northeast, and Southern Plains in December, with each of the top 9 dairy states seeing an expanded output of at least 1.2% for the month. Now, I'm going to say let's look specifically at a couple of the states. Our neighbor to the northwest, South Dakota, grew just under 12%. You think about that, they've offered some incentives for cow numbers to increase, the herds to start, as well as they've got processing capacity in that state to handle more milk. Also look at Michigan and Indiana, 2 states that haven't really over the last 12 or 18 months been known to be adding much production. You look at Michigan added just under 5%, but you got to remember that they had a new cheese processing plant come online there in Bath, and they're looking for milk. They want to keep that plant full. So the negative basis that dairymen in Michigan had seen for several years is now going away because they kept heifers producing more milk, and the plant needs it. That same thing in the northern half of Indiana. A lot of that milk is moved up to the new plant, as well as the southern producers in Indiana are servicing the Walmart plants. Now we can't talk, you know, cow numbers without also understanding the dairy cow slaughter. And this chart here is not really intuitive. As we see the red line headed down, that tells us we're not slaughtering as many dairy cows as we have in the previous month. Dairy cow slaughter rates have finished higher on a year-over-year basis over the last 30 consecutive months. However, in 13 of the last 15, they have been lower. Dairy producers called 65,900 cows in the week ending December 5th. And at first glance, that sounds like a fairly large number. However, it's not historically high for the week after Thanksgiving and has fell slightly short of dairy cow slaughter in the same week of 2019. For the year to date, slaughter is 5.4% behind last year's pace, and there's really no sign showing that cull rates will be back on the rise. Now, another part of cull is at the herd level. And if you look at the upper left picture, you see producers slaughtered less than 1/3 of the milk cow herd last year, and the cull rate was noticeably lower than the rates in 2018 and 2019. In addition, on the lower right side, the heifer inventories, when the year began, just 2.9 million dairy heifers were expected to calve in 2021, according to the semi-annual cattle report. That's 55,000 fewer springers than in the USDA revised forecast for January of 2020. And it's the lowest heifer inventory rate since 2019. For those of you who've heard me speak before, you know that I hedge those numbers a little bit. If you were here in front of me, I'd say hold up your hands if your heifer pen's as full as it has been in the past. And I find that a large percentage of producers tell me, yeah, they've got as many heifers as they've ever had. So I talk with the growers in the Southwest. Their pens are full. I look at the producers in my area. They have a goodly number of dairy heifers. So I hedge that, how much down we really are. The second thing, I think this is a two-edged sword, is as we look at the genetics of the heifers that we're calving, we've used sex semen. We've got those cows out, or heifers out of our best cows. So how long will the penalty for first lactation heifers stay at that 15 to 20% range? I think especially in the next 18 months, we probably will see those heifers. They've grown well. They've got the genetics. We've got an amazing crop of feed in the pit right now. So I think we'll see those heifers produce amazingly well for us. We move now into what drives class 3 price. We're in a federal market order where class 3 is really what drives our price. As we know, cheese is important, protein, whey, butter, all those prices combine into the farm gate price. if you stop and think over the last couple of generations, the rule of thumb has always been 10 times the price of CME cheese blocks and barrels will be the class 3 price. And if you look at today's barrels and blocks, get that average, it's pretty close to what we're seeing for the class 3 price today. I've used this slide for the last couple of years, and I think it helps producers understand how milk is priced. And the next slide will probably put it into a timeline perspective. Class 1 price, you can see those calculated figures affect the Class 1 price. Class 2 has a skim milk pricing factor, but then also is affected by butterfat price. Class 3 is affected with the protein, butterfat, and other solids price. And class 4 is affected by butterfat price and non-fat solids price. So now look over to the left and you can see the darker, almost orange panels there. Those prices that are calculated happen before the milk's even sold. So on the 5th of the following month, we announced what the components were price was. And then at the 5th of the preceding month, we announced what the monthly factors are. And this slide, I think, helps get that much more clear. Advanced pricing, we're going to look at October milk. October prices were based on the 2 weeks, September 11th and September 18th. That data was collected, and then on September 22nd, the milk price for your advanced pricing was released. Then the class and component pricing data was collected for 5 weeks, October 2nd through the 30th, and was released on November 4th. And that gave you the component prices for your October milk. I think this slide does a really good job of providing the data regarding the proportion of the total value represented by each of the components. And we prepared this slide for January through September of 2020. And you can see that protein was just over 49%, butterfat was just under 42%. So those two components were about 90% of the value of 100 pounds of milk leaving your farm. September protein price was $3.39 per pound, was down about $1 from the previous month, but up over 50 cents from September of the year previous. The average protein content was 3.19. September butterfat price was just under $1.60, and that was down about 3 cents from the previous month and about 90 cents from a year earlier. Butterfat average was 3.86. So, you know, all of these components help price your milk. If you think back right at the end of the year, we saw that the milk we're producing as the national herd was the highest in butterfat that they'd ever recorded. So in addition to having the value of the butterfat, we were producing more butterfat per 100 pounds of milk. I like this slide because it gives us the component share. If you look on the right, 2013, you saw that protein was over 60%, butterfat was around 30%. And then at the end of 2015, that reversed. The price of butterfat was about 70% of the milk share, and the price of uh, protein went down to about 30. And it held that way through about mid 2019 when it reversed again and protein became the more expensive commodity. Also look at the right, the difference or the spread between the red and the blue lines, and compare that to the spread on the left side in 2013. We have the widest spread between protein and butterfat that we've had in many years. We've had protein as high as $6. So, the protein is the component that actually does a really large effect in having protein, high milk adds to it. Now we're going to look at what the government payments have done, changing what we're talking about a little bit. We know that CPAP payments in 2020 were significant. If you look under CPAP 1, that average was about $6 per hundredweight. If you go into CPAP 2, that average was down to about $2.15. If you look January through August, that average was somewhere around the 365, 370 range, and for the year was about 247. These two charts help give us an idea of the federal support. In total was just under $5 billion for the dairy industry. But look at the lower right-hand graph here. I really want to take home message to be that payments or purchases made by food donation programs was about 6.5% of all U.S. milk production. And the impact on the all milk price was $3.35 per hundred. Now, on the dairy farm income side, it's 3.1 billion. So it was very significant when we start going back and looking at what our net farm income was. We have to understand, and this slide does a nice job of showing just under 40% of the net farm income came from federal supports. Now, it's not unusual that we have federal supports. That's the red portion of the graphs there. And you can see going back as far as 2000, this has been a significant part of the net farm income through federal support. If you look at the gray side, especially in the last 2 years, you can see that we, in fact, were better off in 2020 than we were in 2019 or 2018 or 2017. So we've really had a pretty significant year as far as being good for the dairymen. But we've got to understand as we plan our risk management that 39% most likely won't be there next year. And to support that, when we look at the class 3 and class 4 futures, we can see that prices went down in February. We've seen that trough, and now we're seeing the prices move up. Class 3 probably going to be in that 1740 range. Class 4 will be just over $16. In fact, I think looking at your revenue protection or your risk management tools, doing some marketing for the third and fourth quarter is a pretty wise decision. The fact that class 4 milk is moving up while class 3 is moderating probably has the benefit for us of uh, not having negative PPDs like we saw in 2020. We just don't have the volatility, don't expect that volatility. Milk prices, I think you can see that I'm thinking we're in that mid and upper 17s as we move through 2021. Just to give you a kind of an idea, these two charts were made 3 weeks difference, and you can see on the left that we did not have the dip predicted that we see in December and January. Although we both predicted about the same for our class 3 milk as we move on into the second, third, and fourth quarters. The final thing I'll mention is back in December, I pushed for dairy producers to really consider strongly the dairy margin coverage program. The risk management tool would cost between 11 and 15 cents and offer if you had 95% of your herd at $9.50, protection from when the margin between milk price and feed cost got below $9.50. As we project that out here in the end of January, you can see that it's pretty likely we're going to see indemnification payments on that insurance through the end of the year. It's unlikely that we're going to see price of corn and forage mitigate much. It's unlikely we see the price of milk move to that $20 level because of the stocks we have. So, Larry, at this point, I'm done with the presentation and I'll entertain any questions.
All right, Fred, the first question we have is when you start taking a look at that one slide that you had about the government program support and how much net farm income was affected by government programs with the thought process that maybe it might not be here for this coming year. Any thought about any additional food box purchases or anything else that might come that can help move away some of the products and increase the prices?
The expectation is there will be some kind of program. Will it be a box program like we've seen in 2020? It might be. That's a crystal ball that I'm just not smart enough to interpret. Yeah, I do think there will be programs that will benefit producers, and I think it'll be tied to the marketplace. But you got to remember, there's a lot of new senators and new Congress folks who uh, are being reminded that we paid a lot of government funding out when there was some $20 and $22 milk. And I think our new folks in our agriculture committees are going to have to work with these folks to get programs that benefit us in the next few months.
And you also mentioned, this is actually a question coming from me, with one of your slides where you had the, raising fewer heifers, there's fewer heifer inventory out there. And then we take a look at the high cow numbers and some of the higher production per cow. And yet we have this lower heifer inventory, which we assume is kind of coming from a lot of different things, whether it be the beef breeding, the sex semen, higher preg rates, reduced calf mortality. Yet the industry seems like it's bringing more and more cows on. So it looks like a structural change. And so when we take a look at the number of producers that we lost in the last, say, 2-3 years, I mean, I think we're looking at a couple different structural changes. Any just comments on them? It's really not a question, but comments on what the future of that might hold.
Well, I think that question always comes back to the marketplace. as we are looking at the heifer market, if we were as short as it is said we are, we would have heifers being worth a lot more money. Now, there's sales where heifers bring good money, but you look across the board, um, from Pipestone to Wisconsin to California, Jersey heifers have strong support, but there's some pretty average or in line with what we've seen in the last 6 months, as opposed to a real strong upward trend for heifer prices.
Okay, appreciate that. So I think that maybe there's one more in here. Let me just double check the chat box. Thoughts on Tom Vilsack going back to the USDA since he was at the U.S. Dairy Expert Council previously? Any thoughts there?
Well, I think what we're going to see is his working knowledge of the dairy export industry should help us. You know, uh, there's so many moving pieces when you look at Southeast Asia and the bargaining agreements we're seeing with China, what we have with different countries and are working on. Uh, Tom Vilsack knows each of those intimately. And I think, while he has to work for all of agriculture, he has to work for the folks consuming food that we produce. I really think it'll help us in a long run, what he brings to the table as far as exporting dairy products.